This is the start of the AutoCAD video tutorial lesson 02. Just a note, this lesson combines the PDF lessons numbers 3 and 4 on covering the line command and the properties palettes. So that will be the goals, to cover the line command and the properties palette for this given tutorial. First, I want to start off talking a little bit about what type of program AutoCAD is. AutoCAD is a graphic-based program used for drawing objects and plans and whatnot to various levels of details. But there's a primary difference between this type of drawing program, such as AutoCAD, and others that you may be familiar with, such as Paint or Photoshop. The way Paint and Photoshop stores its images and graphics and colors is by pixels. Essentially, just like if you take a digital picture, all the information is stored in the form of pixels. The higher the resolution of the image, the more pixels there are per given area. AutoCAD is what's called a vector-based program. The way AutoCAD stores its images and files is through coordinate systems. If I zoom in on an object down here, notice as I hover over the different points with my cursor here, the coordinates on the bottom on the status bar here change. So what happens is that every line, instead of being stored as a bunch of pixels, the line is simply stored as two coordinates, the coordinates of the start point and the end point. And same thing for any other object. A circle has a center point and a radius, and so on and so forth. Unlike a raster-based program uses a bunch of pixels to store it. The advantages of a vector-based program over a raster-based is that it allows you to scale and infinitely scale up or down, or zoom in or zoom out as far as you want without getting any distortion or pixelation. Notice if I zoom in here, the further in I zoom, the line stays nice and sharp no matter what I do on this sample drawing. This is the well-home drawing. If I use an example here of this is the PDF tutorial. If you look at a vector-based line here zoomed in at 1600% versus a raster-based line, notice that the raster-based line starts to get pixelated, or you see the jagged edges, which are the edges of the little square pixels. So that's one advantage of the vector-based program versus a raster-based program, which AutoCAD is. Some examples of other raster-based programs are like Photoshop, Paint, any kind of digital photograph, or any photograph you would find on the web. AutoCAD is a vector-based program, so is Adobe Illustrator, and there's some others as well. So again, vector versus raster. The main difference again is the vector-based program stores things based on a coordinate system. In this case, we're using the Cartesian coordinate system. The Cartesian coordinate system is similar to that which you learned in, I guess, basic algebra, with the x and y axis. Again, those coordinates are displayed down here, x, y. The third one we said before is the z-axis, which is coming out of the screen the way we're looking at it right now, and we're not going to use that for this class. Next, I want to show you how to change the units in AutoCAD from decimal-based units to fractional, or what we call architectural. Notice down here right now our units are displayed in fractions of an inch. We're going to change that. I'm going to show you how to change that. So there's two ways that can be done. From the AutoCAD classic layout, we can go here to Format, Units, and in this toolbar here we want to make sure that architectural is selected, and then we're going to use a precision of a 1/16 of an inch. Simply, all the precision means is that the most accurate measurement we could enter is to the nearest 1/16 of an inch. You may ask, why don't we set it to something really small? The answer is simply because a 1/16 of an inch is the most accurate tolerance that we would actually ever need in an architectural drawing. Anything smaller than that would be considered something like an engineering drawing. For something, say, like an engine, would need to be much more accurate than a 1/16 of an inch. But if we're within a 1/16 of an inch on most things on an architectural drawing, that's more than fine, because the dimensions are typically pretty large. So if a window is off by a 1/16 of an inch, you're never going to notice a difference. But if you're building something like an engine and the piston is a 1/16 of an inch too big for the cylinder, it's never going to fit, nor is it ever going to work. So again, one thing you want to get used to when you open up drawings, format units, change it from decimal, which is the standard, to architectural. Click OK, assume that, and now your units down here will show up as fractions. If not, when you go to enter lines later on and you type in the dimensions, if it's set in decimal format and you try and type in fractions, you're going to get a error, which you'll see in the next tutorial. The other next thing I wanted to show you is these buttons down here are for some of your different settings, such as object snaps, and those which you'll learn a little bit about later. But I just want you to make sure that if you right click on these and you uncheck use icons, it'll show up with some words here instead. And I think the words are a lot easier to understand and follow versus the simple icons that were listed here before. So again, either one is fine, but the tutorials have these listed in there, so it's probably a little bit easier to understand when they say find the ortho button or the grid button. You can actually see the wording listed here. The next thing we want to make sure we have turned on is the dynamic input, which is a DYN here. Simply what that's for is when we want to when we use any tool, say a line command. Notice now that next to the cursor I get these coordinates showing up in these little directions that say specify first point and so on. That's kind of a useful and convenient tool. If I turn DYN off, I only have the pointer there. I still get the information displayed down here and in the command prompt, but I find it easier to use the dynamic input because the information's right there when you're entering, when you're drawing your commands. This portion of the tutorial is to introduce you to the properties palette and the basics of how it's used to see the properties of different objects. Again, I've opened a new drawing here by going File, New, and again select the standard template, AutoCAD template. We'll learn more about those later. Again, notice my units down here are in decimal format, so I want to make sure I change that to architectural, format units, architectural. My view cube is turned on here. I can turn that off again by nav cube display, changing it to 0. Now it's off. Now we're in our regular screen here. The properties palette has a couple of functions. Really what it's used for is to display the properties of an object, kind of as the name sounds or describes. So what I'm going to do to start is simply start by drawing a line of an arbitrary length by clicking on the line command. Of course, I could have always entered a line into the command prompt below. Click a starting point, and I'm going to draw it diagonally across my screen to make an end point. Then I'm going to right-click Enter, or I can also hit the Escape button, which exits a command. Once I have the line here, it's just a line, but I really don't know how long it is or so on. So if I click the line, double-click the line, I get what's called the Quick Properties tool palette here. It gives me some basic information such as the layer the line is on. We'll learn more about layers later. The type of line, whether it's a solid line or it could be a dashed line. We'll learn more about that in a later tutorial. And the length, it tells me it's 3 foot and 4 9/16 of an inch long. If I want to get more information about the line, I can open up the full tool palette, full properties, by right-clicking on the line and hitting Properties. And inside this properties box, again, it tells me it's a line. It has some of the same information that's in the quick properties palette over here, but this also gives me some more information, such as the starting and ending coordinates. So this gives me the x and y coordinates for the first point. Remember that AutoCAD is a vector-based program, so the way it stores its information is based on coordinate systems. So here's the starting coordinates, the ending coordinates. And notice the starting z coordinate is 0 because we're only working in a two-dimensional plane. Gives me the length again, the angle. In this case, it's 25 degrees from horizontal, and it also gives me the delta x, delta y, and delta z. If you recall from algebra, delta, which is a triangle symbol on paper, means change. So simply what delta x means is it's the change in the y, or the change in the x coordinates, and delta y is the change in the y coordinates. So that can be found by subtracting the starting x from the ending x and the starting y from the ending y. Simply what that means geometrically is that delta x is the horizontal length of your line, and the delta y is the height of your line. Or if you were to finish this off with a triangle, the delta x would be the equivalent to the length of the base of the triangle, and the delta y is equivalent to the height of the triangle. So this is your delta y, this is your delta x. This is useful for figuring out the distance between the horizontal or vertical distance between different objects. Again, to get to the properties palette, right click on the object of interest, select it first, right click properties, and then you can find the properties as necessary. An object is any part of your drawing. In this case here, the circle is an object. I could make a rectangle here an object. I can have another line going this way. Each one of these things is separate objects. When I want to select different objects, there's a couple different ways of doing it. If I want to select multiple objects for any reason, I can click on them one at a time. And I can keep clicking on them, and that'll keep selecting objects. If I want to deselect them, I can hit the escape button on the top left of my keyboard. That'll unselect everything. But if I want to select a bunch of things at once, I can highlight them. And simply by taking my cursor and drawing a rectangle, if I draw a rectangle from left to right, notice it only selected the circle and the line below, versus if I draw it right to left, now I get a green versus a blue rectangle, and now the circle and the two lines were selected. The reason that happens is because if you drag right to left with this, like this green rectangle shown here, everything that the rectangle touches will be selected. If you draw left to right, only the objects that are totally enclosed by the rectangle will be selected. So again, right to left gives you green, left to right gives you blue. Green selects everything that the box touches. Blue is only everything that's totally enclosed by the box. Now you'll find that useful later on for being able to select and modify objects when we start talking about some of the tools on the Modify toolbar. But for now, if you can right click and activate the properties of a line or any other object, understand what these basic features represent, you're in business. Notice now that I hit escape, there says no selection up here. Now with the properties palette open, if I click on a circle, now it says circle. It gives me the area of the circle, the circumference, the diameter, radius, and some other and the coordinates for the center point of it. Click escape. Now I have a polyline, which is this object here. It gives me the area, the length, and the dimensions of it as well. So the properties palette is useful for a number of things. Also, if you want to change the properties of a given object, you can also do that through the properties palette. This pretty much concludes this tutorial on the properties palette of part of lesson 2.